A political cartoonist parodies outbreaks of violence in Congress during the 1850s. Library of Congress, to find the historical parallel to Thursday's horrific attack on the Capitol Gazette newsroom, you have to look really far back, to the days of horses and covered wagons, swords and duels, and the country's bitter fights over sovereignty and race. In other words, 200 years. During the country's early days, as I wrote this year in a special Columbia Journalism Review issue on threats against the press, violent attacks on the media were so common that reports of such incidents did not even make the front page. Listen to this story on Retropod. For more forgotten stories from history, subscribe, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Amazon Echo, Google Home, and more. There was no Twitter for aggrieved subjects of news articles to vent against newspapers, many of which were more partisan than breathed news today. They would simply challenge reporters and editors to duels. And, it being a time of family and professional honor, the journalists would oblige. In 1852, a famous war general named James W. Denver challenged Edward Gilbert, the editor of a weekly newspaper in California, to a duel after the paper exposed corruption by him. It didn't end well for the editor. The Capitol Gazette's forebears, the paper was founded in 1727, would have no doubt recognized the newspaper as a target, with authorities saying the alleged shooter had a vendetta against the paper. John Nairn, a University of Illinois journalism professor, painstakingly catalogued attacks on the press dating back to the late 1700s in his book Violence Against the Press, and found hundreds of physical attacks, mob assaults and shootings. Reporters once carried daggers to deal with unruly politicians. As the stakes increased, Civil War, Reconstruction, so did the carnage. For example, this violence ultimately fizzled out, Nairn wrote, in the post-Civil War years, as stable governments formed and newspapers dropped their partisan ways in favor of objectivity, particularly as industrialization took hold. Why? To attract broad audiences for advertisers. Now, with the rise of the internet and the collapse of print advertising, a new generation of highly partisan news outlets has quickly shaken and divided the electorate. At political rallies, journalists are threatened. A year ago, a candidate for Congress in Montana body slammed a reporter. In a sense, people say that the current media situation is reminiscent of the highly partisan journalism of the 19th century, Nairn said in the Columbia Journalism Review article. And what you see reappearing are some of the forms of violence associated with that 19th century journalism. Read more Retropolis. Before Twitter and Facebook, there was Morse code, remembering social media's true inventor mailed that baby. A brief history of kids sent through the U.S. Postal Service. Great God, he is alive. The first man executed by electric chair died slower than Thomas Edison expected. Discovered, Philadelphia's high-tech, totally natural plumbing of 1812. Leo Frank was lynched for a murder he didn't commit. Now neo-Nazis are trying to rewrite history.